Find your future by exploring your world. The Massachusetts School of Law challenges their students to explore the important issues of our time, learning from experts in fields like politics, sports, and business law. From first-hand accounts and dramatic reenactments, in-depth conversations with society's leaders, from historians to lawyers, from high-tech professionals to environmental experts. The Massachusetts School of Law at Andover presents MSLAWTV.
Hello and welcome. I'm Diane Sullivan. Many years ago, a previous educational forum produced by the Massachusetts School of Law received top awards for a show on the myths of fairy tales. We explored the issue of whether traditional fairy tales send young girls the wrong message, that they should wait for Prince Charming instead of being self-reliant. Today, we will explore why many women read women's fiction novels, the benefits, the psychological effects, and whether these books encourage women to be optimistic and to dream big, or are they a harmful escape that set unrealistic, unattainable expectations? Well, three things for sure. Women's fiction novels are written by smart women. They feature a strong female heroine, not a sidekick to a man, and they're going to have a happy ending. So joining us today on Martha's Vineyard is novelist Jean Stone, author of many novels about contemporary women published by Random House, HarperCollins, and Kensington Books. She's taught a number of writers' conferences and has been a guest lecturer at several colleges. One of her books is optioned for a Lifetime movie. So today we will discuss the popularity of women's fiction novels and some of Jean's terrific books and series. Jean, in your Second Chances series, Elaine says, no, it's not about a man, it's about something much more important. So what I want to ask you is, what is that something? And does the answer rest in the difference between women's romance, women's fiction, which we tend to use synonymously, but you're going to set us straight.
Okay. My stock answer for what's the difference between romance and women's fiction is, in romance, they get a man.
At the end.
Yeah. And women's fiction, they get a life.
Great difference.
But big difference, really. That's not their goal. Their goal is not to find a man. It just isn't. And in romance, even though they might not say it up front, you know that that's going to be the goal.
So that's what happened in your Second Chance series.
Well, that's not really romance. It isn't romance. It wasn't put out under romance.
No, right.
It
was about getting a new life moving forward.
Yes. And it was really about four women who had been college roommates together, and they're all in their 40s, they're midlife, and they're all sort of in a place where they want to do something different, and they hadn't seen each other for a while, and they're each is very different from the other, and they decide to open, one of them's getting married for the second time, and they decided, let's open a wedding planning business for women who are getting married for the second time. The one who's getting married was looking through magazines, and they were all for young women. And they said, we're not young anymore. So that's what the whole weddings part was all about, was just the premise of a business for them.
We'll talk more about the series a little bit later, but I will say how much I loved it and how much I benefited from the wisdom in those pages.
Oh, thanks. Wow.
Why did you start writing women's fiction? What inspired you to do this?
I'm not sure when her book came out, but you might recall Jacqueline Suzanne's Valley of the Dolls.
Yes, my mother watched that movie and read the book forever.
Today that would be considered romance, because they lived in this women's hotel in New York, which of course was like the Barbizon or something. And yeah, they were from all different places. And I saw the way it was structured. So you really got to know each of the women independently, and yet they all had a common goal. Their common goal was really to get a man, but I like that concept of having women from different backgrounds and whatever, and they all had the same common interests, though, that they wanted to do.
Well, that's wonderful, and I didn't suspect that, so
yeah,
thank
Valley
you
of
for
the Dolls.
sharing it.
And years later, years ago, just not that long ago, I tried to reread it. I got a copy of it somewhere, and I was like, oh, really? It's funny, writing changes with the times.
I wish I had my mother here today, who sometimes would scold me about what I read, said, you know, you're setting unrealistic expectations. Well, boy.
That's funny, yeah.
Who is your typical reader? I know I'm one of your most avid readers, as is Rosa, who's here in our audience today. So tell us who the typical reader is, in your opinion.
I think it's mature women or maturing women, you know. I don't think it's women in their 20s or men so much, but I have readers that are in their 20s, and I've had men that read my books. And so, you know, I never know quite how to answer that. I think the majority are, you know, mature women.
And certainly young women could greatly benefit by reading some of these books.
I still benefit when I read some of this stuff and I say, did I say that? Somebody must have told me that and I used it because it was so good. You know? Yeah.
Why are women generally reluctant to let others know they read women's fiction and they're not reading some historical, you know, account of some major significant something that's happened in the United States?
Well, I don't know, but I do think that is changing too. I think younger women, as they're coming along and reading, they have a whole different attitude, just as I certainly did for my mother. You know, I think that they're more open to not really caring if people give them a hard time about what they're reading, because there's a lot of it out there now too. There's a lot of women's fiction out there, and it's great stories, and yeah.
And we benefit from the wisdom in the pages, and I think that's so important.
Yes, yeah.
What do you believe that women want to read about specifically when they open up the pages of your books?
You know, I used to say I write beach reading. I write beach books or airplane books. I think that I don't think about that. And I don't know if other authors are like that, but I don't think about, I want to teach someone this, or I don't do that. I just think about the story, and the character evolves while I'm writing it. It's hard to explain that, you know, it's just my head. It's just, I have an idea for a story, but the character doesn't really get shaped well enough until I have actually written about her. The best part about I know we'll talk about that later, but the Vineyard series, the 6 books, I had a chance to really get to know these people.
Yes.
In fact, the first time I moved to the Vineyard, I was staying here for like 9 months in the winter, and I remember a couple of my friends had said to me, I'm from Western Mass originally, and they said, why are you going to the island? You don't know anybody there. And at that point, I had written 6 books that take place here, maybe 7. And I said, oh, I know a lot of people. I do. I've done book signings at the bookstores. I know a lot of people. And I was walking down Main Street one night in Edgartown, and it was dark, and it was winter, so nobody was around. It was so cool, and I thought, I don't know a soul here. They were right. I made them all up.
You know, when I was a child, I had an imaginary friend growing up, so I know what you're talking about.
Never outgrow it.
Right, exactly. I know that I can trust Jean Stone, because I know when I pick up one of your books, I'm going to have a happy ending. That's important. I might have mystery, but it's going to be light mystery. I'm not going to be afraid to go to bed after I, finish the last page of the book. So I think that's important. I think that's what some of your readers are looking for.
That's great, because I think that's what I always have tried to do, is if instead of the, woman gets a man thing, I try to work to get a satisfying ending. I think is the way I've always thought of it, so that people do feel good after they've put it down, that I don't know. I've always said, if it makes me cry when I'm going through the last draft, if it makes me get a little tear jerky at the end, then I'm happy with it.
Oh, wonderful. How do you think your books impact women, like somebody like me? How do you think they impact my life?
I have no idea.
I'll tell you how they impact me. I see somebody like, we'll talk about your Vineyard series for only a second here. I see somebody like Annie. And I say, I'd like to be a better person like she is. So I think they also help us resolve some of the choices we've made in our lives. So thank you for that.
Sure. I think it's maybe more like what she becomes over the course of the story. Doesn't she get better?
Yes, she certainly does. But what I was pleased about, and I know I'm jumping ahead, but what I was pleased about is Annie has a dilemma. She can stay where she is, marry the man that she loves, but to do that means you got to give up your career and your own personal goals. So watching her make those decisions, and the decisions, and I'm not going to spoil it, that she chooses at the end, I thought were important. I thought they helped me in my professional choices.
Yeah. Okay.
And so I think that is, in fact, how they impact your readers. Do you believe that women's fiction in general encourages optimism?
I hope so.
Well, I know for me, it certainly does, and I hope for all your readers as well. I think that's something the world needs.
Me too.
I think it's important.
Optimism and kindness and just being nice to each other, for crying out loud, yeah.
And again, referring back to the women, the lead women in your books, they're very kind people, and that's why I say it can help me become a nicer person by reading those stories. Really, I'm reading your solutions to how we should handle controversies.
I wish I could handle it all the way my characters do all the time.
In 3 Times the Charms, you say more than once, to all things, there's a time, there's a place, there's a purpose. That brings me back to the rock band, the Byrds, growing up, with similar themes in some of their songs, turn, turn, turn. What's the significance of those words?
That particular character that was the star of that one of the 4 series, and each woman had her own showcase. That was Sarah, and she was the Native American. And I think that I use that a lot of the whole spiritual part of indigenous people. And she was from California. She was a Cherokee. So I think that's where that came from, and I mean, it's really based on the biblical thing too. And
exactly.
I think that was something that she would have wanted people to feel,
And I wanted to be sure I was right that it came from the Byrds, turn, turn, turn.
Yeah, it did. Absolutely.
And what they reference is the biblical history of that particular song.
Yeah,
so,
but so spiritual, and I think that she was a very spiritual person from her Native American heritage.
In the book, and I really enjoyed that type of diversity in the book of the women. The lead characters in so many of the women's fiction books today are becoming more diverse, and that's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, they are. Yeah. I know. I just did that. I also had an African American in one of my lead main character in one of my earlier books. I think it was Birthday Girls, but I'm not sure which one. I know it was one that came out maybe in the late 90s. It was, before I really started writing a lot of vineyard stuff, so. Yeah.
Jean, thank you for the wonderful work you do. We need to take a quick break, and we'll be back to talk about your 2 series momentarily.
From day one, I knew I took the right step.
The Massachusetts School of Law is challenging,
but you feel welcomed and supported at every turn.
You're learning the professional skills you need to get hired.
From professors with real-world experience. Trust me, that makes a huge difference.
I now have a job I love, and the best part is, I'm not in debt.
No LSATs required. Teachers that make a difference at the most affordable law school in New England, the Massachusetts School of Law. Your future starts here.
I feel like her heartbeat is like same speed as mine, and I think we have this like deep connection, this heart connection in her heart, that there's room for me and Mom. When I'm holding her, it makes me feel calmer. It's a sensory thing. It's a thing with Asperger's.
She's really good with Anya. I've seen adults react to my daughter when she has meltdowns, like she's from a different planet. And this little animal just sat next to my child and was just like, it's gonna be cool. She's my superhero. Good job, kitty cat. When we adopted Lucky, we discovered all the wonderful things that make her unique.
Lucky's a little bit of a lot of things, but mostly she's pure love.
the vineyard features very heavily in your books.
Yes, it
almost
does,
as though it is a character.
It's the main character in all of them, I think.
Why is that?
Because I think it deserves the place as a main character. I think just part of the island and the way it is, the pulse that keeps this thing alive, is a huge character, and I think this helps the characters to I've had several characters that they will come to a place like this, sit here on those benches up there, and just look out at the lighthouse, and they solve problems that way, in their own heads, and I think it's just conducive to that. So yes, I'd say it's the main character. Yeah.
Do you think women need to escape their lives?
Not anymore. I think women want to read about options. I think they do like a bit of escape, but they want to see what other people are doing too. And I guess I could be wrong about that, but years ago they wanted to escape. Now I think people kind of know. They know more than I did when I was younger.
How do your books help women grow?
Oh man, I have no idea. I have no idea really. I know they've helped me grow, but I don't know how. Just from, studying about other people and learning to overcome obstacles, the biggest thing for me.
So what do you want us to learn from your books in terms of, say, character conflicts, their setbacks, inspiration, empathy?
Yeah, all of the above. All of the above, yeah. I think setbacks are important. Don't they guide us in new directions too, that we never thought of before sometimes?
Absolutely.
That we didn't know were options that were open to us.
And almost like we're forced into them.
Yeah, right.
But in a good way.
And it ends up to be a good way. Sure. Yeah, no, like that.
And so do you think your books encourage women to seek a second chance at life or even at romance?
I don't know. I mean, I hope so, if they're in a place where they want to, when they're looking for something, when they're not terribly happy with their life the way it is. Maybe they do that. I don't know. I hate to speak for my readers. It's funny how people get different things out of the same paragraph. They can see it differently. And it's all about, as someone once told me, it's all about what the reader brings to the table, as they say, what their life is about.
Right.
So,
yeah. I'm going to read you a quote from one of your books.
Okay.
Then, from the corner of one eye, Elaine spotted Lloyd's roses. She sighed. She closed her eyes again and wondered if, despite what we do and how hard we try, the hooves of our past are never far behind, trotting us toward a future already determined by those things we've already done. So do you think our past influences our future?
I do. And I have a little anecdote about that. The reason I did the trotting and whatever is because the opening sentence for Elaine's book, whatever her first real part as a main character was, I love this line. She was born in Saratoga Springs, New York, where the elite once went for mineral baths and the horses still ran in August. I still can't believe I actually wrote that. But I went to college at Skidmore in Saratoga, and so I did a lot of up there. And that, to me, I realized when I was just trying to think about what we would talk about today, I realized that I was doing sort of what I do on the vineyard, because Elaine, her father owned a luncheonette, and she used to be a waitress there. So, and Saratoga Springs is filled with the elite and the upper class, and so with her too, I did that. I did the merging of people together as just people.
Amazing.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And I didn't even realize it.
Okay, so let us discuss how this current market now has changed from the time when I was a young girl. Because the roles of women have also changed since then. Yeah. So what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, man, I don't know. I think that we all evolve and change. I think of my mother's generation, and she certainly changed. And I can actually remember those things that she would change to. She didn't come up to where we are, or where I was by the time I was, her age. But I think that, we're all always evolving as women. And I love to show women in different situations to see how they handled it. And I like the mix because I think maybe that way, maybe one character will touch one person, that another character will touch somebody else. You know, I don't expect that everybody's going to love the same person or whatever. So,
Right.
yeah, that's, yeah, things have changed. It's keeping up with the times.
So
yeah.
do you think that women are looking to relive their earlier days, but perhaps with a different ending to change that, if you will? To change their lives?
I don't know. I don't know if they're looking to, you know, I don't know. I think it's just different for everyone. You know, that sounds like kind of a cop-out, but I do. I think it's different for everyone. I know it's been different for me. You know, so things that I thought I really wanted to do, other than writing novels, when I was younger, I can't even imagine that I even thought about that today.
So let me ask you this. Do you think that women's fiction sets unrealistic expectations about men?
Depends upon who's written it.
Well, let's say, I guess the ones that you've written.
Probably not mine.
No, you don't think so?
I don't think so.
What about setting unrealistic expectations about happiness? Because that's sort of
maybe,
independent
but you know,
from...
when I was talking to my editor about this, she said to me, she said, you know, isn't it true that really love and romance are in every facet of our lives? And we're not talking about coupling, we're talking about children, families, friends, being in places, having a job that you really love. You know, love, it can be fulfilling in many different ways. So I think that's what I try to go for now, because I think we're more aware of it today than we used to be. More aware of that. It used to be, oh, you got to have the man, like the Valley of the Dolls, Jekyll and Suzanne. That's their whole goal, you know. And today it's like a guy. Oh, wait a minute. Is there anything about a guy in here somewhere? I thought I read. So who cares? You know. So,
right.
I don't know. I mean, they're in it, but it's not. It isn't.
It's not the goal.
Not the focus. No,
it's not the focus.
Because I think women are more mature and they've been opened up. They've had so many more opportunities for them. When I was in college, I went to University of Pittsburgh first because they were only one of 2 colleges in the whole country that had a creative writing major. The other one was Boston College, and that was too close to home.
Right.
So, but that's another story.
No.
Haven't written that one yet.
So, do you think that there are books like yours whose target audience are men?
Sure, there are. Absolutely. In fact, men write women's fiction. When men write it, it's just called fiction. It's not called romance. It's not called. It's just called fiction. Yeah.
Right.
But there are. Yeah. And that's true. I'm not making that up.
Right.
Honest. Yeah. It's
Okay.
true. Yeah. They do.
But would that also be where the focus is, to find that happiness as opposed to finding the
I
woman?
don't think
perhaps?
so. Oh well, maybe they just don't know how to do that. I don't know. But I have had many male readers that have contacted me over the years. You know, over time.
Right.
So when I have a book signing, especially when I'm around my hometown area, I have tons of men that come. It's like, what are you guys doing here? You really care about this stuff? But no, they do. You know, I mean, they're not. Yeah.
And do you think that men could learn from reading your books?
I don't know. It'd be nice, wouldn't it?
It would be nice. So do you think that you write, because these are fictional men written by women, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
is this sort of the what women want? Are those fictional men what women want?
I wrote my first male viewpoint character with my first Vineyard book, Places by the Sea. And I had readers ask me, how did you write such a good male? And when I was giving a talk somewhere, I would tell them the truth, which was, I have no idea what goes through a man's head, but I thought about what would a woman want to go through this guy's, what would she want to think was going through his head, and so that's how I wrote it.
Right.
I think I'm a little better at it now, but I've just paid more attention to that. But that was the first male I did. That's what I did.
What a challenge that must have been, though, for you.
Actually, it was kind of easy. It's like, now, what's the perfect male? What's he going to think like? And so there he was.
Earning your law degree shouldn't burden you with overwhelming debt. At Massachusetts School of Law at Andover, we believe it should be affordable, achievable, and yes, even an enjoyable first step to your successful career. We believe in an atmosphere of support, flexible class scheduling, and hiring professors with real-world experience, ensuring you leave law school with the professional skills you need We are the most affordable law school in New England, and we believe in you.
The Massachusetts School of Law. Your future starts here.
You see certain things get reincarnated in your children. My daughter is very much inspired by my wife's artistic pursuits. So my daughter started making necklaces. She makes what we call affirmation fashion. I tell her every day that your black is beautiful. Your black is beautiful. Your black is beautiful. And if there's anything better than being beautiful, it's being smart. And if there's anything better than being smart, it's being kind. And reaffirming that every day is our method of making sure her chin never drops. My dad wasn't around, and I remember riding a bike and falling off and cutting myself, and me never just wanting to get back on it. People ask, how your children learn how to ride a bike, and you didn't. I didn't teach them. I just created an environment where they taught themselves, and all I had to do was be there.
Welcome back. We're sitting here with Jean Stone talking about women's fiction. Jean, I'd like to now talk about your Vineyard series book. First, you have it all in there. You have romance, you have mystery, you have strong women, but a baby in a basket. Who could resist this?
Really, yeah. That was my editor's idea.
Well, it was a splendid idea. Tell us about the Vineyard Christmas.
Well, my editor had called me and asked me if I would write this, a book. And I said, well, what would I do? I've already written Vineyard stuff. She said, well, I'm thinking of a baby in a basket arrives on a doorstep. I said, Wendy, hasn't that been done a few thousand times? She said, not like you could do it, Jean. So, but my concern was, where am I going to put it on the island? And I thought, so a baby shows up on our doorstep, now what? Now what do you do with it? So I placed it on Chappaquiddick because Chappie is a little more hard to get to in bad weather. You have to take that little boat, the little raft I call it, over. And I had a blizzard, so I put it in December, and that's how it became Christmas. And so, and power outages and internet goes down and all that stuff. So, yeah.
Well, I have to tell you, I started, and I wasn't stopping that book until the end. I didn't care that I had to stay up all night. I had to know about this baby in the basket and that everything was going to work out fine, which now I trust you on, but at that time I wasn't sure. Okay. Book number 2 in the Vineyard series. Yeah. Annie, the strong female lead. She finds an unconscious woman out on her front lawn. And she comes to realize pretty quickly that that woman, like herself, had to find her strength from within because she had no family, no one to lean on, no home. Tell us about that and what you were hoping to inspire with that story.
Well, that was a real, what has ended up to be, or was all along, I guess, something I really get tuned into is the differences between the seasonal people and the year-round residents. And so that's what you had there. You had someone who's living in a little cottage, and she was a bridesmaid in this very wealthy home, in a gorgeous place. And as the story unfolds, she's a woman from great wealth, and the woman in the cottage is not. And so I really wanted to show that we're just people. We're all just people. And so she helps her, and in turn, she gets helped, my main character gets helped from what she learns from this young woman, and hopefully it works both ways for them. So that's why I did that.
All of your books, there is a theme about helping members of your community, something we don't hear much about other than a little bit of lip service at Christmas time. Yeah. So that's a wonderful message to keep delivering.
Well, that's the island.
A vineyard morning. Annie's past comes to light, and then she has to reconcile that with her present life. Tell us about that struggle.
This is about her mother.
Yes, her mom.
Yeah. I had a good friend in college. I went to University of Pittsburgh, and she was gone for a semester. This is back in the late 60s. And when she came back, she told me she'd had a baby and given her up for adoption. And at the time, I remember thinking, what a great idea for a book. Because she had gone to a home for unwed mothers, and She had to do that. They made her change her name. You know, it was crazy back then.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, and actually that was my very first book. Sins of Innocence became that book. But anyway, so coming to do this book, I thought that, you know, I really want to use something like that. What she had done, my friend had done, was when her daughter turned 30, she found her. She hired someone to find her, and she wrote her a letter. And the daughter sent her back an acknowledgement that she received it, but she said, I'm sorry, I'm not interested in meeting you. So, and that was very upsetting to my friend at the time, but you know, we just sort of, she got through it, and along the way, the daughter decided she would get in touch with her mother, and she did, and it was like 20 years later after that letter. So, and my friend died 2 years after they met.
Wow.
And her daughter had said to me, because we've become good friends, and she told me once, she said, I only contacted her because every year on my birthday, I would sit on the bed, on our bed, she was married and has her own family, and take out the letter that she got and cry. And see, I think of it now and it just makes me cry. But she said, my husband came in when I turned 50 and he said to me, you have to answer that letter. I'm not going to watch you have to go through this again next year on your birthday. So
wow.
That's where that all came from. That's why I really started to delve into that. The daughter looking for the mother and the daughter
and
thing. Yeah,
it's much more common today than it was.
Absolutely.
You know, people go through this
yes,
struggle, and I think for anybody who has been adopted and knows they've been adopted, and then the biological mother reaches out, this book will help them through that process.
I hope so. Yeah.
Book number 4, A Vineyard Crossing, which tests love and friendship. Tell us a little bit about that book.
Well, I think it tests it because Annie, our main character, is suddenly faced with the reality of she doesn't know who she can really trust. She's living in a place, she's only been here a little while at that point, and she has this situation happen with this man who appears, who's a media person, and what does he want from her? She is a best-selling mystery author, and then she has this other situation with this other woman who befriends her, and then she turns out to be someone she did not know who she was, and so she's having to deal with, how do I know who I can trust? Is there anyone I can trust, or am I just being foolish? And making new friends is really what that's about.
Book number 5, A Vineyard Wedding, deals with the struggle of Annie and her soon-to-be stepdaughter. You have a missing little girl in the story, and you have an approaching wedding. Tell us about this book.
Well, this one is a little bit different because it is about, I'm bringing in different generations, so to speak. And Annie has no children of her own, so she's trying to deal with her fiance's daughter and figuring out, how do I do this? What am I supposed to be? What are my boundaries supposed to be like? And then this missing younger child is you know, just really rocks her world when she goes missing. And so I think that it's all about just knowing to trust herself and her own instincts, to know that she will figure out what is the best way to do things, and it's okay if she screws it up, because life will be fine. It might take a different direction than she wants it to or thinks she wants it to, but you know, she knows enough that she is a strong person by then, because she's already been in 4 other books. But I do have one little caveat about that story, is that book opens with the line, it's the ugliest wedding, it was the ugliest wedding dress Annie had ever seen. I plagiarized myself from the book Once Upon a Bride, which I start off by saying it was the ugliest wedding dress they'd ever used. Did you catch that? And I didn't even know that. Didn't even know that. In that same book also, in the Second Chances series, I had my main character, her last name was Lyons, Lyons, and that's the name of Annie's fiance.
Yes.
So, you know, the brain only has so many cells, and after 25 books, you know, it's like, I didn't realize that I had done that at the time.
They kind of all mesh together, I bet, at some point. Because you don't write just a single book, you're writing a series.
Yeah, right, yeah.
The final book in that series, the Vineyard series, book number 6, you have a wedding a week away, you have serious illness. Tell us about book 6.
Again, she's really being tested now about her future. And does she stay on the island? Does she follow a dream that she thinks is a dream? Is it just a dream? It's kind of a, or is it just a wild idea? Is she doing this because she thinks it would be cool when in fact, you know, that wouldn't be the right reason to do anything? So I think she's grown now, and I think we kind of know what she'll end up doing or how she'll end up dealing with his other daughter, or that is the same daughter she had trouble with. He has two. One she's very close to, and this other one who's a little bit older is a bit of a wild child. And she's the one who's ill, and so Annie's kind of stuck in that whole, how do I deal with this? Because he's having to deal with his ex-wife who was off island. So there's a lot of this whole, it's mostly inner stuff for her this time, of just.
With marriages not lasting a lifetime today, at least more than half do not, there tend to be an ex-wife in a lot of, you know, the new situations. And I would think some of your words would be an inspiration to those trying to deal with that complex relationship.
Good, that's nice to know, because as I said, I don't really know when I'm doing stuff that's what I'm doing. I just know these people, I get to know them as they're showing me, revealing themselves to me.
Let's turn back time to your older series, which I absolutely love, Second Chances. Books about friendship, about love, about romance, about marriage, and most important, can it be better, life in general, the second time around? Tell us what inspired you here.
I had spoken with my editor. That was when series were first becoming popular in women's fiction. And she said, would you like to do one? And I said, well, I don't know. And so what I did was I took my 4 characters and split them into different books. And so I have one who's throughout, they're all throughout, but one is more about each one person's story. And and I think it was, I don't know what really inspired me to do that, the second weddings. Maybe because I had a friend who was in the business of wedding planning. I didn't know her very well, but I knew that, and I think maybe at the time that just kind of gave me an idea. I don't really recall.
I'll tell you, most people in their life at some point get knocked down, whether it's they lose a job, whether a relationship ends. These books, to me, talk, how do you pull yourself back up, go forward in a positive way with a smile on your face? And I think that's invaluable for women to read.
And they all have a different story. One of them was a business person. She lost her job. Another one was married and divorced. Another one's husband died, and the other one I can't remember.
Finally, I want to get to your new series that's going to be out shortly.
Oh, yeah.
Up Island Harbor, I think
it's the first one, yeah.
Any sneak peek here?
Sure. That one I remember because I just finished that one a few months ago. It takes place up island. Oh, duh. I had said to my editor, when she asked me to do another Vineyard series, I said, I can't put it in the same place. I've got to get out of Eggertown. Because how many times can they go to the wharf or the news for lunch? You know, I mean, they just can't keep doing that. So I said, I'd like to put it up island because it's a whole different experience up there. And I'd like to do it in Menemsha, which is a little fishing village. And it's just, and it brings in the Wampanoags more than I have brought. I mean, I've brought them in a bit in the other books, but I really wanted to explore that a bit more. And so that's why I chose that.
Jean, my hope from some of your previous series are some of the characters are going to reappear in this particular new series. There's some answers we want. Can you give us a preview here?
Yes, some do come back.
I certainly hope so, or you'll be hearing from us.
No, they will. They are already in the first one, which will be out.
That is just terrific.
And they continue, and I might be bringing in a couple others too. So
wonderful. Well, that cheers me up. Finally, I'm going to have an answer. Well, Jean, I can't thank you enough for being here today.
Diane. Thank you.
Your books are just terrific. Keep on writing, please.
Yeah, I will.
moms and dads. We know it's not always been easy, and it's been a lot of hard work. What you have achieved here today is going to help us and our futures. It is why we are coming up on stage to collect your diplomas. Everything I do it for you. Mom, love you always. No, it's true. Everything I do it for you.
When you graduate, they graduate. Visit finishyourdiploma.org to find free and supportive adult education centers near you.
Taking the first step towards your legal career can be an overwhelming task at many other law schools. Lucky for you, the Massachusetts School of Law is not one of those schools. Applying is easy. No LSATs required. Scheduling is flexible with daytime and evening classes, and learning is remarkably rewarding since all of our professors have real-world experience. All of this and much more at the most affordable law school in New England.
The Massachusetts School of Law. Your future starts here.
So why in the middle of winter did we travel to Martha's Vineyard?
I teach a women's issues class. Many years ago, we did a television show that is a part of the discussion in class, whether we teach girls the wrong message with fairy tales. Are we teaching them to wait for Prince Charming to be beautiful rather than being self-reliant? Also, you know, it bothers me that the stepmother is always portrayed to be evil. So I began to think about women's fiction, women's romance novels. We'll talk about the difference. Is that something that is really adult fairy tales, and is it bad or good? So that's what we went out to find the answer on.
So what was your conclusion?
That I think adult fiction or female romance novels are not adult fairy tales. We're not young, impressionable kids. We read these books for a different reason. Partially, we read them because we know that the strong female lead is going to have some kind of conflict that has to be resolved. Hopefully, we learn something by reading the resolution. Also, another part of it is we read to escape, you know, to take a break from life, and I see that as a very good thing. What do you think?
What do I think? In terms of the traditional fairy tale, where we had dragons and you know, mermaids and fairies and fairy godmothers, I don't think that current women's fiction follows that sort of trend, even though there are those types of books out there. But I do think that we do read those types of books to enter a world that is not our own, and that fictional world, and to perhaps encounter problems that are not our own, so that we don't have to solve the problems. There's someone else who's going through those, and someone else who's going to resolve those problems for us. So in that sense, in the sense of a fictional world, I think they are, you know, fairy tales, and they are to a certain extent an escape. So let me ask you, of all the female and all the male authors that are out there, why Jean Stone?
Because I love to read her books. She's balanced. They feature strong women facing very difficult choices. Additionally, she balances career and relationships. Quite frankly, it's something I've never been able to do. I don't believe I'm admitting it on air, but I am. And so, not that I'm trying to learn for myself, it's a little late for that, but what I am trying to do is be able to help guide our law students into balance, because that's something important that we've never had as women in the past.
It's never too late. So do you agree with Jean's distinction between women's fiction and romance novels?
Jean says in women's romance novels, the woman at the end of the story ends up with the man. In novels, the type of novels she writes particularly, she says the woman at the end of the story ends up with a life. I'd like to think that the woman could end up with a balance between both if that's what she wants. If not, she should be able to decide. And to say that women's fiction is not women's romance, I agree with her distinction, but I will tell you, I think most women want there to be a romantic relationship in the books that they read. What Jean does in one of her series called the Vineyard series, which is why we went to Martha's Vineyard in part, is that you have a strong female lead that goes through all of the books in the series, and at the end, you clearly don't know what she's going to choose, career, the man, or a combination of both. So I think that's very beneficial.
So what do you look for in a book?
I look personally for a book that is familiar, it's relatable, and most importantly for me, and I know I'm a little bit different, is I don't want an author that's going to include things for the shock value. For example, you know, there are a lot of great female authors, but every now and then you're reading along and they harm an animal, they kill an animal. Well, that offends me. It's not something I want to read. So I trust Jean. I know that there's going to be a leading woman. She's going to face a conflict. She's going to overcome the conflict. And she's not going to upset me in the process. So that's why I chose Jean.
So why do you read?
I read for escape, for enjoyment. I think about the Sondheim musical, Sondheim on Sondheim. And one of the entrance songs says, I don't read to think. I don't read to search for the truth. I read to dream. I read to live in other people's lives. I read to escape. There's more to it than that, but I guess I would echo those sentiments. So why do you read, Amy?
It really just depends on the mood, right? So there's different types of books that we can read, and you know, depending on the mood, you can read fiction, nonfiction, women's fiction, romance novels, and it really is just about escaping your own reality. You know, we deal with our own work and our own family issues, our own, you know, responsibilities on a daily basis. And it helps to put that aside for even a moment and read a page out of someone else's life. And to be able to, for whatever amount of time you're reading, enter their world and experience their world, travel to different places. You know, like to Martha's Vineyard if you haven't traveled to Martha's Vineyard.
But don't go in the winter.
No, it was beautiful actually. Just looking at some of the Christmas decorations, it was beautiful. But through these books and through these stories, you get to just visit places that you might not have been to or never planned to go to. And especially when you think about what you're reading on paper and imagining those stories, not just reading the words on the page, but in your mind creating a whole entire world, perhaps different from someone else who's reading the exact same book. Yeah. They likely are going to imagine it in different ways, and I think that's just fascinating.
I'm always asking myself, how would I handle that dilemma? Now let's see how the author resolves it, probably in a much more competent way than I would. So I learned from that.
I usually do that with, although I'm not too big on mystery novels, I'll try to come up with, okay, the whodunit, so to speak. You know, oftentimes I'm nowhere near what the author ends up coming up with in those particular novels.
We're often criticized, women, for being too emotional. Do you think, like I think, that women's fiction is generally very emotional?
I think it's just a part of the character. I think if we are creatures that are led by emotion in particular situations, I wouldn't label that to be an emotional person. Just like if you approach something in a more intellectual manner versus the emotional, it doesn't box you into that particular category. I think it's whatever that particular situation requires. And where you have women's fiction that are dealing with women, all different types of women in all different types of scenarios, emotion is going to be a big part of it.
Heck, life is emotional. Think of it. Do we go through a day without emotion? I doubt it, right?
We shouldn't.
Amy, there is a quote from Jean's book about whether one can truly escape the hooves of our past. Your comments on that?
I think that would be an interesting quote. When I think of hooves, I generally think of the echoes that the hooves make when, the animal is running. And I think that we can, to a certain extent, escape our past, but I think it's always there. I think it's always present. I think it's always there in the decisions that we make, whether it is a decision to avoid situations from the past, or perhaps things that have led to our current situations that, again, echo in the past. I think that's a wonderful metaphor in terms of, sort of connecting the past and the present. What do you think about it?
I thought long and hard about that because I found it to be interesting when I read it. I read it a few times. And I thought about it and concluded that I really did escape the hooves of my past in part. I grew up poor. I grew up in a traditional home. Mom stayed at home, Dad went to work, and there were 4 of us kids. And I was uneducated. But with education, I think the hooves of my past changed, and my desires of what I wanted for my own life came forward.
So the women featured in women's fiction usually struggle and eventually overcome those struggles. It takes a little bit of a while to get there, but they do. And at some point, of course, they experience that personal growth. Do you think readers benefit from that personal growth that the characters go through?
If they're open to it. Some people will read the book and say, oh, well, this is fiction. But I like to believe that most people read it and benefit greatly. And so if they ever face some of those same dilemmas, they've had exposure to a resolution that worked out well.
So do we have any idea of the male market for women's fiction?
When I took a look at that, admittedly a bit ago, about 20% of men will typically look at women's fiction. It can be substantially higher depending on the author. Men love thrillers, so if the woman writes a thriller book, they're going to have a much larger male audience. When I think about myself, I hate thrillers, so I think it depends on the person.
Is there a Pulitzer Prize that is awarded equally for books that are starring women?
No, generally the lack of knowledge to female authors writing about women is, I don't want to say non-existent, but I will say very low. It is getting better. Let me tell you about an Esquire article that appeared. Back in 2015, there was an article on 80 books that all men should read. That was the essence of the title. Of the 80 books, one was written by a female. Well, public outcry and criticism changed things. The next year, when they came out with the list, there were 8 women. I know, slow progress. But let's go to 2022. There were 30 women. So public pressure asserted on things that are important sometimes does influence how we go forward as a society.
Now, as a lay person and also as a law school educator, what would you say is the value of reading, just generally?
Oh, I think reading stimulates our brain and it helps keep us current. Abraham Lincoln, all those years ago, and I don't know the exact quote, but said something like, all that I have learned, I learned from books. Well, I'm not going to go that far, but certainly books have helped in my decision-making process.
Now, the books that girls and boys reading today, how are they different from the books that we read when we were growing up?
I often wonder whether moms and dads still read all the traditional fairy tales. Do we still have the wolf ready to eat the kids? And do we have Hansel and Gretel? Do we still read them? My mother used to say to me, with you, I read the books word for word. Then I said to myself, with the next child, what is it that I'm reading? So I'd like to think not. I can tell you that there are some wonderful books today that feature strong women. And I even think of like musicals, which I love. Elphaba. I mean, what a leading example of a strong woman who makes her own decisions in life. The consequences be damned, if you will. She isn't going to relent to, pressure. And I think of many others. We all grew up reading Little Women, and Jo in Little Women is an example of a strong woman. What about Disney? They're doing a much better job with Frozen. The leads in that, the two sisters, have strong personalities. But I guess the real question for me is, are we throwing out those old fairy tales where the stepmom is evil, where they're very violent and the woman always ends up with the prince, or are we still reading that? To that, I don't have an answer.
Now, if your mom were here, what would she say about choices?
Oh, we had plenty of discussions about that. When I announced going on in a business career, I remember her saying to me, Diane, I'd be more excited if you told me you were having a husband and children. So years later, she sat me down and said, you really made the right decisions. And so if she were here, I think she would applaud that I went on to law school and that I'm a law professor. I think she would see that that was right for me.
I think she would. So as a final question, Diane, let me ask you, whether we're looking at women's fiction, romance novels, or any type of fiction, do you think those books set unrealistic expectations for both men and women?
Well, let's go back to Mom. Mom used to see me, especially when I was going to the beach with my beach reads. She would say to me, put away those books. You're setting up unrealistic expectations for men. They don't come every Friday night with 24 roses. So put those away. But interestingly enough, after Mom had died, I saw that she had her own collection, including Valley of the Dolls. So would she say they set up unrealistic expectations? Yes, but what I say, there are things in life we should settle on, but I'm not sure we should settle on what would make us happy.
That's a great answer.
Amy, do you think the books that we're talking about here today set unrealistic expectations?
I think the type of books that we've discussed today, for the most part, contain flawed characters. You don't have Prince Charming who's perfect from start to finish and who finally finds the perfect princess that's perfect for him. You have characters that have a past and they have experienced troubles and problems, and for the most part, you see characters who try to get away from something and end up finding something else. It's not what they search out to find, but perhaps find it along the way. And we go along that journey with them. And so it's part of it is where they're searching for what they want, searching for that happily ever after, whatever that happily ever after means to them. And that means something different to everyone, men, women, or one woman over another. Everyone has a different happily ever after. And I think what these characters are doing is searching for what they want. At the end of her book, Twice Upon a Wedding, Jean Stone writes, of all the things in the world women can have, I think they want love, respect, and peace. Maybe, after all, they're the things that men want too. Maybe we should work on giving them to one another. Until next time, be well.